Night was dark, like an ink blot that swallowed everything around it. I stood in the kitchen, my hands busy washing dishes, but my thoughts drifted away from this daily routine. Every clink of dishes echoed in my mind, overlaid with the constant and relentless snoring of my husband, Robert, who sat in his chair with a glass of whiskey. His presence, like bondage, pressed down on me, making me feel alone in this confined space, a space inhabited by grim loneliness. Robert had once been the one who'd attracted me, who'd burned with life, but now he was fading before my eyes. Each sip of alcohol stripped him of his humanity, took him into a world where I had no place. I tried to ignore him, catching myself that he was becoming more and more alien to me by the minute. The feelings inside of me burst into tears, which I hid behind my shoulders. At that moment, Ethan, my 19-year-old stepson, walked into the room, and with him seemed to come a slight breath of fresh air. He was young, full of life, and in his eyes I saw the warmth that was sorely lacking in both of us. Ethan had always looked to me for support, and as he lived out his youth, I noticed how he grew more confident, how his gaze became deeper and more attentive. "Hi," he said in a low voice, and the words instantly awakened a tender feeling in me, as if they'd caught me right in the heart. "It's okay," I replied, trying to hide my tiredness from tonight. But his stare made me wonder if he noticed how much Robert didn't care about anything. Ethan leaned against the wall, keeping an inexpressible tension between us. His childhood idol, me, now seemed like an associate, and in that embrace we sought comfort. I felt my pulse quicken. It was as if something in his gaze was nudging me in this silent dance where undeserved elemental feelings hovered. An inner awe was coming from his deep gaze. It was more than an understanding, it was a message that our here and now was filled with something forbidden, charged with an energy that threatened to burst beyond the boundaries of the familiar. I stared at him, feeling inexplicably excited and afraid. "You don't have to do everything alone," he said with a kindness, but also a seriousness that confused me. I felt his words pierce me, making me think about the most important thing of all, how I really was. I opened my mouth to respond, but I accidentally ran into his warm hand touching mine. The touch, so innocent and yet so full of passion, stirred up emotions I'd long forgotten. I felt my breath catch, and a flame ignited inside me, ready to explode. "Ethan," I started, but he was looking at me like he wanted to read all my secrets and fears. The quick movement of his hand pushed away all the cautions and rules that had ever governed our lives. "You deserve better than that." His sincerity struck me like lightning splitting the sky. I felt the tears come to me, releasing the rage that had been slumbering deep inside. I suddenly wanted to tell him everything about Robert, about my fears, about the endless evenings when I felt not just alone, but a stranger in my own home. I'd never done that with Ethan, but now he was an island of safety for me, someone who understood and felt. The light touch of his hand burned. I couldn't keep up. Our hearts beat in unison, our breaths merged into one, and even the sound of Robert's snoring from the living room couldn't obscure the atmosphere between us. Every moment was filled with hopelessness, and yet I could feel the wall I'd built between us crumbling. I remembered the way he'd smirked, the way he'd laughed. Those memories made me cringe. But the moment his lips almost touched mine, I froze. Ethan was looking at me with heat, and I knew that in that instant, everything would change. This kiss could be the beginning or the end of what we knew. I knew I was stoking the flames, and it was dangerous, but very tempting. The first kiss was light, like a gentle whisper, but soon it became more insistent, plunging us into a whirlwind of passion and desire. I ran my hands through his hair, feeling the world around us fade away, leaving only the two of us, trespassing into a forbidden garden full of emotion and fear. We pulled away, each feeling a wave of shame and tension, realizing exactly what had happened. I didn't know how to react. It felt wrong, but all the feelings that raged inside me said that I had finally found something important, how I'd waited so long for this moment, when I could open up, feel needed and wanted. Now that I'd experienced it, how did it feel to go back to normal, to the screams of loneliness and Robert's drunken haplessness? I realized I would have to face reality the next morning. But for now, I felt the magic of the moment still burning my skin, reminding me that life had boundless depths, and maybe if I dived into it one more time, I'd find the meaning I was looking for. Robert's touch was too strong and not enough at the same time. I didn't know what to make of it, but one thing was clear: something had changed between us. My heart pounded in unison with the storm of emotions that came over me. It was fear and excitement, the anticipation of something profound. Then, that night, I couldn't sleep. The house was silent, with only the occasional sound of Robert's snoring coming from somewhere in the living room. But my thoughts couldn't settle, resonating in my head: his words, his touch, that unusually penetrating gaze, all of it replaying in my head like a film stuck in a projector. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to get rid of those thoughts, but the mess in my head wouldn't leave me alone, as if leading me on. These thoughts made me get up and walk quietly down the hallway. The faint light from the living room lamp filtered into the hallway, and I tried not to look at Robert so I wouldn't wake him. I didn't want him to know how I was tormented by internal conflict. In the kitchen, I poured myself a glass of water, and its chilly surface would only cool in my mind. The fluctuating light of the staircase, a flood of unknown emotions, swelled in my heart as I gazed out the window at the dark, quiet street, as if seeking solace on the outskirts of my inner world. I turned around and saw Robert standing in the doorway. I turned around sharply and saw Robert standing in the doorway. He looked tired and lost, his usual confidence not looking at me from that distance. And in that moment, my heart sank. It seemed that the whole old life where we were together and happy had faded amidst new and unfamiliar emotions. He stepped closer, the tension between us building. I felt that every moment I spent in his presence was now colored differently. He seemed more than just the man I had known in our years together, but something more, a source of doubt and admiration. We began to learn from our misunderstandings, and I felt the closeness between us clouded with a sense of some importance. The sense of freedom spurred by it left behind a nostalgia for other bodies. I realized that in this closeness to Calvin, to what we had created together, in a situation like this, an obstacle was building up that could too easily be crossed. He offered support and care, and with each word it felt like the boundaries were blurring. As the conversation heated up, belittling all caution, excitement overwhelmed me. I remembered every look, every touch, as if they were precious moments I'd dreamed of for so long. I knew it couldn't be ignored. This unexpected connection only sharpened desire and intensified a bond that was beyond suspicion. Building confidence in my every move, I felt an underlying tenderness ignite inside. It was as if a wave was lapping over me, raising in awe the newfound desires I'd been silent about for so long. The moment our gazes met, time stopped, and that moment became an eternity. Each of his touches magnified my senses vividly. I couldn't pull back, and I didn't want to. The more I resisted, the more I was pulled into the abyss of an image of delusion and sincere desire that I lacked. I was willing to leave behind the fear of loneliness for the sake of this new discovery, and the moment our lips met, the world went silent. All other sounds disappeared, leaving only us, the two of us lying on the edge of the abyss. It was as if we had read each other, putting all our emotions into that kiss. All the doubts, all the difference between light and darkness seemed irrelevant. When we pulled away, I felt an electric shock pass between us. We were completely different, but that connection was incredible, and it filled the emptiness inside of me. I couldn't stop that flow for a second, which drove me crazy. We were alone in this quiet kitchen, but there was pulsating life all around us. And yet I realized that every movement, every breath became an ordeal. On the edge of conflicting emotions, I realized that I had to choose how to live my life, and how this moment would affect me and him. The feelings overwhelmed me. The madness and the need to be there for him was more real than ever. I knew that everything that was happening was not just a whim, but the first step to true happiness. Determination swept over me, and I realized I didn't want to hide from my desires anymore. Wounded by inner torment, but proud of the new feeling, I decided to take a step forward, to go to the place of light and warmth, where a moment awaited us that could change everything. The truth was on the horizon, and it was the beginning of the journey to a new life.